Business owners, CEOs, and other members of the executive management team, as well as managers and sometimes even employees, are struggling with downward and upward communication. Sometimes messages work both ways, but sometimes they don't. So you should really consider the type of message that you are sending or crafting and what structural pattern works best for downward and upward communication. Hello, my name is Jorma. I am the founder and managing director of Business Made Agile Company Limited. In this video, I will try to explain you what is the difference of downward and upward communication and how it affects the structural pattern and style of the messages that you are crafting. Downward or top-down communication refers to information flowing from management to lower-level employees. By definition, downward communication is information and instructions from upper management to lower-level employees. The purpose is to provide employees with directive, policies, and organizational updates. And a few examples are job instructions, company announcements, training materials, and performance evaluations. On the other hand, upward or bottom-up communication involves information and feedback flowing from employees to higher level management. So the definition is information and feedback from lower level employees to upper management. And the purpose is to allow employees to share their perspectives, concerns, and suggestions with management. A few examples are employee satisfaction surveys, suggestion boxes, performance reports, and open door policies. When you are communicating downwards, you should consider some cultural issues. In Western cultures, people may favor direct and clear communication, providing detailed instructions and expectations. However, in Eastern cultures, people might emphasize indirect communication, leaving room for interpretation and respecting the authority of superiors. And some key considerations are: first, consider the appropriate level of formality. Next, the preferred methods of communication. And finally, the level of detail needed when delivering downward communication. When you are communicating upwards, you should consider some cultural issues. In Western cultures, people often value open communication and encourage employees to voice their opinions and concerns, even to the top management. However, in Eastern cultures, people may be more cautious and hierarchical, with employees potentially being more hesitant to directly challenge or question superiors. And the key considerations are: first, consider the level of formality expected. Second, the preferred methods of communication. And finally, the appropriate level of directness when sharing information upwards. So what is the conclusion? Positive, persuasive, and non-sensitives or sensitive messages utilize direct structural pattern for both downward and upward communication. Although you should always consider cultural differences, especially when communicating upwards. So if the message is positive and tries to persuade people to take positive action, or if it's just non-sensitive information the direct structural pattern works for both ways. Next, negative and internal negative persuasive messages use direct and semicircuitous structural patterns respectively for downward communication only. So if your message is negative and you are communicating from higher level of organization downwards, then you can use the direct structural pattern. However, if you also want to persuade people to take action, even if the message is negative, then you should use semicircuitous structural pattern, communicating downward. And next, let's focus on the upward communication only. So internal negative and internal negative persuasive messages utilize semicircuitous structural pattern for upward communication only. So consider messaging or conveying a negative message to your boss or your boss's boss. And if you also want to persuade your boss to take action, even if your message is negative, then you should apply the semicircuitous structural pattern. And finally, if you are communicating externally, so if you are conveying a message which is external negative or external negative persuasive, you should utilize circuitous structural pattern for upward communication only. So if you are conveying a message to your external customer, for example, and if you are trying to persuade them to take some action, even if the message is negative, then you should utilize circuitous structural pattern when communicating upwards. I have studied engineering at the Helsinki University of Technology and business administration and communications at the Aalto University in Helsinki. I graduated in 2014 and have an executive MBA degree. I've been communicating as the chairman of the board, CEO, CMO, program and project manager, and business unit manager, as well as an employee for the past 30 years. I've been crafting all kind of business messages during my career before AI. And during the past 2 years, I've learned how to use AI for creating business messages. That's it for today. I hope you understand now what is the difference between downward and upward communication. And you should also always consider the cultural circumstances that may affect the structural pattern of your messages and also the style of your messages. Thank you for your time, and I wish to see you in the next video.